The crunch of snow under spinning tires at 6 a.m. wasn't an accident. Brenda Thornfield gunned her Mercedes straight through my daughter's Snowman like she was aiming for it. 3 hours of 8-year-old Zoe's work, demolished in seconds by our HOA president's morning power trip. She didn't break. She didn't apologize. She accelerated through that innocent Snow family with the same cruel satisfaction she wore when issuing illegal fines to grieving neighbors. The first destruction, I rebuilt quietly. The second time, I got suspicious. By the third rampage, I realized this woman had no clue what I'd buried 3 feet underneath that seemingly innocent snowman. While Brenda terrorized 47 families with her measuring tape and violation notices, I'd been preparing something that would transform her next demolition attempt into the most spectacular mistake of her life. Something that would cost her everything she'd built in 6 years of absolute power. What would you do if your neighborhood bully destroyed your child's happiness? Drop your wildest revenge story below. Let me paint you a picture of what I thought was going to be our fresh start. Marcus Kellerman, that's me, 34 years old, electrical contractor trying to rebuild after a divorce that left me counting every dollar twice. I'd scraped together every penny for a $398,000 house in Willowbrook Estates, the biggest purchase of my life and my last shot at giving my daughter the stability she deserved. Zoe was 8, still asking why Daddy and Mommy couldn't live in the same house anymore. This move was supposed to fix everything: safe streets, good schools, neighbors who'd actually wave from their porches, the kind of place where kids build snowmen without looking over their shoulders. Then I met Brenda Thornfield. Picture a suburban dictator with a real estate license and too much time on her hands. 48 years old, HOA president for 4 years running, living in an $850,000 colonial McMansion that sparkled like a museum display. She carried herself like she'd been appointed mayor of everyone's business. Our first encounter happened while I was unloading my life from a U-Haul. The sharp click, click, click of designer heels on concrete announced her approach like a funeral march. There's Brenda, measuring my fence with what looked like surveyor equipment, not a Home Depot tape measure, but some professional contraption that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. "Mr. Kellerman," she announced, gripping her clipboard like a weapon, "precision matters in a community of standards." My fence? 3.5 inches too tall. She measured it twice just to be absolutely certain I was violating her precious covenant. The systematic harassment started immediately. Week 1, $75 fine because my garbage can remained visible 2 hours past pickup. I'd been installing electrical panels across town, got home after dark. In Brenda's universe, having a job wasn't an excuse for anything. Week 2 escalated to $150 for Zoe's Christmas wreath. My daughter had spent hours weaving red and gold ribbons together, beaming with pride at her creation. Brenda's violation notice cited non-compliant holiday color schemes. Apparently gold wasn't traditional enough for Willowbrook's aesthetic standards, but week 3? That's when she aimed directly for my daughter's heart. Zoe lived for sidewalk chalk. Every afternoon after school, she'd create masterpieces across our driveway: butterflies with purple wings, hopscotch squares stretching 20 feet, her name spelled out in rainbow letters. The scritch-scratch of chalk on concrete meant pure happiness in our house. $225 fine. Temporary ground decorations exceeding sunset removal ordinance. I held that violation notice with trembling hands. There was an actual rule dictating when children had to wash away their artwork. The metallic taste of swallowed rage filled my mouth as I watched Zoe's face crumple when I explained her drawings had to disappear every single evening. Mrs. Cecilia, our 70-year-old neighbor, started whispering warnings over the fence like she was sharing state secrets. Her voice would drop to barely audible whenever Brenda's name came up. 3 families, Marcus, gone last year. The Johnsons, the Martinez family, that young couple with the baby. She found ways to find them until they couldn't afford to stay. The smell of Brenda's perfume, sickly sweet floral that lingered in the air like a toxic cloud, became our household alarm system. Zoe would freeze mid-play whenever that scent drifted through our windows, her 8-year-old voice turning small and worried. "Is the mean lady coming again, Daddy?" Tom Reeves, a firefighter from 2 streets over, dropped the first real bombshell during a Chance hardware store encounter. "You know her husband Derek owns 35% of Pinnacle Property Solutions, right?" He glanced around nervously. "That's our management company. Talk about the fox guarding the hen house." But the Snowman Wars, that's where Brenda revealed her true nature. Zoe had spent 3 precious hours building her Snow family masterpiece. Dad's snowman, Mom Snowman, 2 kids, even a snow dog with carefully placed stick legs. She'd sacrificed buttons from my old work shirts, begged a carrot from Mrs. Cecilia, wrapped her favorite purple scarf around the snow mom's neck. Monday morning brought the inevitable. Temporary structure violation notice tucked under my windshield wiper. $200 fine, 48 hours to remove unapproved architectural elements. I paid. What else could I do? Tuesday, Zoe rebuilt smaller, hidden in our yard's back corner. Wednesday morning, I watched through my kitchen window as Brenda's silver Mercedes deliberately swerved off her usual route to demolish my daughter's creation. Snow exploded across our driveway like shrapnel. She slowed just enough to roll down her window. Perhaps more appropriate placement next time, Mr. Kellerman. That moment, watching my daughter's tears freeze on her cheeks, I knew this wasn't about HOA rules or community standards. This was personal warfare against an 8-year-old's happiness. December 26th arrived like a bureaucratic nightmare wrapped in holiday paper. While normal families lounged in pajamas eating leftover cookies, Brenda Thornfield was conducting what I can only describe as a Christmas enforcement massacre. The violation notices materialized on doorsteps across Willowbrook like coal and Christmas stockings. Families who'd spent December creating magical holiday displays for their children suddenly found themselves buried under citations for excessive decoration duration. The HOA covenant, buried somewhere in those 47 pages of legal gibberish we'd all signed without reading, apparently required complete holiday removal within 24 hours of Christmas Day. I'd learned from my previous encounters with Brenda's measuring tape of doom. December 27th found me outside at 6 a.m., methodically stripping every light, every wreath, every hint of seasonal joy from our property. The morning air bit at my exposed fingers as I worked, my breath forming white clouds that dissipated like my hope for a peaceful neighborhood. But when you're dealing with a woman who hunts violations like a bloodhound tracks scents, perfection still isn't perfect enough. That afternoon citation hit me like a slap across the face. One single icicle light strand, no bigger than a shoelace, tangled in my garage gutter. I'd missed it during my frantic removal mission. The attached photograph showed Brenda had used what looked like a professional camera with telephoto lens to document this major infraction, $275. Her Facebook post that evening poured salt in the wound. Standards don't take holidays in quality communities. True property value champions understand that excellence requires unwavering year-round commitment. The comments from her supporters made my stomach turn. Neighbors I'd waved to in passing, agreeing that some people just didn't understand community responsibility. That night, after tucking Zoe into bed with promises that the mean lady couldn't hurt snow friends in dreams, I did what any red-blooded American does when faced with injustice. I researched the hell out of our situation. 3 hours of county records, state filing documents, and business registration searches painted a fascinating picture. Pinnacle Property Solutions wasn't just some neutral management company. It was practically the Thornfield family business. Derek's 35% ownership stake meant every fine Brenda imposed literally put money in their household bank account. I'd read somewhere during my contractor licensing courses that board members were supposed to disclose financial conflicts like this, but somehow that information had never made it into our community meetings. The deeper I dug, the more interesting things became. Online reviews for Pinnacle painted a disturbing pattern across their managed communities. Escalating enforcement, selective targeting, families driven away after mounting legal costs. One review from Forest Glen Estates, posted just months ago, included a phrase that made my coffee grow cold. They don't want rule compliance, they want property turnover. So that's when I realized Brenda wasn't just power hungry. She was running a business model designed to force out certain residents and flip their properties through her real estate connections. Movement outside caught my attention around midnight. Through my home office window, I watched Brenda conducting what could only be described as a surveillance mission, flashlight in hand, photographing properties like she was documenting enemy positions. The woman was treating our neighborhood like her personal kingdom. The next morning brought an unexpected encounter that changed everything. Mel's Diner occupies the corner of Main and Elm like a time capsule from better days. Cracked vinyl booths, coffee that could wake the dead, and the kind of atmosphere where strangers become allies over shared grievances. I was grabbing breakfast before heading to a job site when Raj Patel slid into my booth uninvited, looking like a man carrying heavy secrets. You're dealing with the Thornfield enforcement machine too, right? His laptop bag hit the table with a thud that suggested preparation. Because I think I've figured out her system. Raj worked from home as a software engineer, which meant he'd witnessed Brenda's daily operations from his front window for 2 years. His violation collection rivaled mine. Mailbox paint 3 shades off regulation, $150. Vehicle parked 6 inches too close to his property line, $200. And my personal favorite, $300 for unauthorized landscape modifications, when he'd planted tulips in his own flower bed without submitting a formal horticultural application. The booth's vinyl squeaked as more unlikely conspirators joined our impromptu resistance meeting. Betty Morrison, 73-year-old retired English teacher, arrived with a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. 40 years of managing teenagers had apparently prepared her perfectly for documenting adult bullies. Pattern recognition, Betty announced, spreading photographs across our table like a detective building a murder board. She targets single parents, elderly residents, minorities, anyone she perceives as vulnerable. Classic authoritarian behavior. Punch down, never punch up. Tom Reeves completed our accidental fellowship when he spotted us through the diner's window. The firefighter brought crucial intelligence. His buddy at city inspection had reviewed several of Brenda's violations and confirmed they were creative interpretations of HOA rules, not actual municipal code problems. She was manufacturing crises where none existed. The sound of coffee cups clinking and breakfast conversations provided perfect cover for our planning session. We looked like ordinary neighbors catching up over pancakes while quietly documenting systematic community harassment. But it was that evening's Snowman incident that pushed me from documentation into action. Zoe had rebuilt behind our house this time, a modest 3-ball creation tucked where no sightline restriction could possibly apply. Simple button eyes, carrot nose, one of her mittens serving as a hat. Pure childhood joy sculpted in snow. I watched from our kitchen window as Brenda's Mercedes made an unprecedented detour through our back alley, deliberately targeting that innocent snowman until it exploded across our yard like a white grenade. That night, Zoe's tearful question shattered my last reserve of patience. "Daddy, why does she keep killing my snow friends?" The next morning, I started designing something special for Brenda's next demolition mission. Something involving electrical components and a very colorful welcome surprise. January brought a new level of vindictive creativity that made Christmas enforcement look like amateur hour. If I thought Brenda's holiday crackdown was personal, I was about to discover she'd been holding back her real ammunition for the perfect moment to destroy my life completely. The anonymous complaint arrived at city planning on a Tuesday, targeting the one thing that kept food on my table, my work truck. Someone had reported commercial vehicle violations in residential zoning, complete with time-stamped photographs and detailed documentation. The irony burned like acid. Half our neighborhood housed contractors, landscapers, and service workers who parked work vehicles at home. But somehow, only my electrical contractor truck warranted official investigation. Thursday brought Brenda's surprise inspection circus. She materialized in my driveway with an entourage that would make a federal raid jealous. Professional photographer wielding equipment worth more than my monthly mortgage, her friend Janet from city inspections chain-smoking Marlboros, and Derek carrying a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets. They spent 3 hours measuring, photographing, and documenting my detached garage like they were processing a terrorist hideout. The acrid smell of Janet's cigarettes mixed with Brenda's suffocating floral perfume, creating a toxic cloud that clung to my driveway long after their departure. From my kitchen window, I watched them huddle over paperwork, pointing at my garage and nodding like archaeologists who'd discovered King Tut's tomb. Friday's citation delivered the killing blow. Unauthorized home-based business operations violating residential covenant restrictions. My garage workshop, where I stored electrical supplies and occasionally organized equipment for jobs, apparently constituted a commercial enterprise requiring special permits and neighbor approval. The ultimatum was surgical in its precision: immediate cease and desist on all electrical work originating from my property, or face daily fines starting at $500. Since 90% of my jobs began with loading equipment from that garage, this wasn't just harassment, it was economic assassination designed to bankrupt me into submission. But Brenda's masterpiece of cruelty was still coming. Wednesday evening's neighborhood watch meetings started like community theater. 23 residents discussing speeding cars and loose dogs while pretending we all cared about street lighting. I attended hoping to build support, maybe convert a few fence sitters into allies for our growing resistance movement. That's when Brenda launched her nuclear strike. "Before we adjourn," she announced from behind the folding table that served as her suburban throne, "I need to address community stability concerns." Her voice dripped with that fake concern that meant incoming character destruction. "We've all noticed the lifestyle transitions affecting certain households." Her laser focus found me across the fluorescent-lit room like a heat-seeking missile. Divorce situations can create unstable environments that impact property values and family-oriented community standards. The silence that followed felt thick enough to cut with a knife. 22 neighbors suddenly discovered their shoes were absolutely fascinating, while the overhead lights hummed like wasps in a jar. Single-parent households often struggle with appropriate supervision and community compliance, Brenda continued, her voice gaining strength as she warmed to her demolition. Perhaps families experiencing major life transitions should consider temporary housing arrangements until their situations stabilize. The translation couldn't have been clearer if she'd used skywriting. Divorced fathers aren't welcome in Willowbrook Estates. Pack up your broken family and find somewhere else to lower property values. I drove home gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, the metallic taste of swallowed rage coating my mouth. Every fiber of my being wanted to turn around and deliver the verbal beatdown Brenda richly deserved, but explaining that explosion to Zoe later would have been impossible. The next morning brought the game changer that flipped our entire strategy. Raj's software engineering skills had produced something beautiful. 2 years of HOA violation data transformed into color-coded spreadsheets that revealed Brenda's discrimination with mathematical precision. His laptop screen displayed charts that would make civil rights lawyers weep tears of joy. "The pattern is undeniable," he said, highlighting columns that told the whole story. Single parents average 4.7 violations annually. Traditional nuclear families get 0.8. Elderly residents living alone hit 3.2. Minority households face 3.9. Betty leaned over the data, her retired teacher instincts immediately recognizing systematic bias when she saw it. She's not enforcing rules. She's conducting social cleansing through selective harassment. But the real breakthrough came from Tom's contact at city inspection. After reviewing photographs of my garage violations, his friend confirmed our suspicions. Nothing I was doing actually violated municipal building codes. Brenda was manufacturing crises through creative HOA interpretations, then using Derek's city connections to add false official weight to her fabricated problems. Here's where things took an unexpected turn that changed everything. That weekend, while Zoe and I built her 4th attempt at a hidden snowman behind our shed, something different happened. Instead of Brenda's usual hit-and-run destruction, she parked in our back alley and methodically destroyed that innocent snow creation 3 separate times, backing up and running it over until nothing remained but scattered chunks and one crushed purple mitten. But this time, Mrs. Cecilia was watching from her kitchen window with a camera, and this time, she was ready to finally speak up about what she'd witnessed for 3 years. "That woman," Mrs. Cecilia said quietly that evening, showing me crystal-clear photos of Brenda's deliberate destruction, "has terrorized this neighborhood long enough. It's time someone stood up to her." That's when I realized our resistance movement had just gained its most important ally, the one neighbor everyone trusted, who'd been silently documenting Brenda's reign of terror for years. The next phase of our plan was about to get very interesting indeed. February arrived with the kind of perfect snow day that transforms neighborhoods into winter wonderlands and apparently triggers homicidal tendencies in HOA presidents. School cancellations meant kids spilled into yards like excited puppies, and for the first time in months, Willowbrook Estates rang with genuine laughter instead of whispered fears about violation notices. Zoe burst from our house that morning like a snow sculpture general ready to rally her frozen troops. Within an hour, she'd organized every neighborhood kid into the most ambitious winter construction project our cul-de-sac had ever witnessed. Children aged 5 to 12 collaborated on an entire snow village, families of snowmen holding hands, snow dogs with stick tails wagging, even a castle complete with towers and bridges that would make Disney jealous. The sight melted something in my chest that had been frozen since the divorce papers were signed. Parents emerged carrying thermoses of hot chocolate and spare mittens, actually talking to each other instead of hurrying past with nervous glances. Mr. Peterson contributed a bag of carrots for noses. The Martinez family, who'd been living in fear since their own Brenda encounters, donated colorful scarves that transformed simple snowmen into neighborhood characters. For 6 magical hours, Willowbrook felt like the community we'd all mortgaged our futures to join, the symphony of childhood joy, laughter mixing with the satisfying crunch of snow being packed into perfect spheres, created music our street hadn't heard in years. Even Mrs. Cecilia ventured outside, her camera clicking with the dedication of a documentary filmmaker preserving something precious before it disappeared. But in Brenda's kingdom, happiness was apparently a violation waiting to happen. 6 a.m. the next morning brought automotive terrorism disguised as community enforcement. The deliberate roar of a Mercedes engine being gunned like a weapon jolted me awake. I stumbled to my front window just in time to witness the most vicious attack on childhood innocence I'd ever seen. Brenda's silver sedan carved through the children's snow village like a panzer through a peaceful settlement, targeting each creation with military precision. Snow families exploded into white shrapnel. The castle collapsed into formless rubble. 3 hours of collaborative magic destroyed in 90 seconds of calculated malice. She wasn't finished. Methodically shifting between reverse and drive, Brenda ensured no snowman survived her blitzkrieg. She backed over the snow dog twice for good measure, then rolled down her window to survey the carnage like Napoleon reviewing a successful battle. Unapproved temporary structures violating sightline ordinances, she announced to the morning air, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Community standards exist for everyone's protection. But this time, she'd made a fatal miscalculation. This time, she had an audience. 47 windows framed 47 neighbors witnessing their HOA president wage war against childhood itself. Mrs. Patterson, whose 6-year-old had spent 2 hours crafting snow angels around the castle, stood in her doorway weeping. Tom Reeves, heading to his firefighter shift, stopped dead at the destruction, his face cycling through disbelief and rage. The breaking point had arrived, and it sounded like children crying through glass doors. By noon, our scattered resistance had crystallized into neighborhood revolution. The Willowbrook United WhatsApp group exploded from 12 to 34 members as parents shared videos of Brenda's rampage alongside their own horror stories. The digital uprising was beautiful to witness, neighbors who'd suffered in silence for years finally discovering they weren't alone. Betty Morrison's living room became our war room, her coffee table buried under documentation, photographs, and what resembled a CIA analysis of Brenda's enforcement patterns. The rich aroma of fresh coffee mixed with the electric energy of collective righteous anger as strangers became allies over shared trauma. "This isn't about rules anymore," declared Sarah Martinez, whose family had been house hunting after months of targeted harassment. "This is about a woman who destroys children's joy for sport." Tom's newspaper contact was already drafting a story about suburban tyranny, but our real breakthrough emerged from an unexpected direction that changed everything. While we'd been documenting current abuse, Betty's teacher instincts had sent her exploring historical records with the thoroughness that had made her legendary among former students. Her systematic excavation of county archives had unearthed something that reframed our entire struggle. "I've been researching our neighborhood's legal foundation," Betty announced, her voice carrying that particular authority teachers reserve for truly important lessons. She spread weathered documents across her table like a history professor revealing lost civilization artifacts. Willowbrook's HOA wasn't built to last forever. The papers told a story none of us knew existed. When our development was carved from farmland in 1994, the original covenant included what lawyers call a sunset clause, automatic termination after 30 years unless residents voted specifically to renew the association's authority. The expiration date stared back at us from faded typewriter text, March 15, 2024. 3 weeks away. The silence stretched like a held breath as the implications detonated in our minds. Brenda had been operating an illegal enforcement machine for 8 months, collecting fines under expired authority, terrorizing families with powerless threats. "Every violation notice since last March," Raj whispered, his programmer brain calculating the ramifications, "is legally worthless." Tom's grin spread like wildfire. "She's been running a protection racket without knowing her protection expired." The beautiful irony was poetry. While Brenda obsessed over covenant minutiae, she'd missed the document's most crucial detail. The very authority she wielded like a weapon had quietly self-destructed while she was measuring grass heights and timing holiday displays. But here's where our strategy evolved from survival to conquest. Instead of immediately exposing her powerless position, we decided to let Brenda continue building her legal coffin until the scheduled renewal meeting March 20th. Every additional day of illegal harassment would strengthen our case for damages and civil rights violations. That evening, after consoling Zoe about her murdered snow friends, she asked the question that sealed Brenda's fate. "Daddy, can you make the mean lady stop hurting everyone?" I kissed her tear-stained cheek and made a promise that would change our neighborhood forever. "Yes, baby girl. Daddy's going to make sure she never hurts anyone ever again." The next morning, surrounded by electrical components in my garage, I began designing the most satisfying surprise of my contractor career. Something that would make Brenda's next demolition attempt legendary for all the wrong reasons. The documents spread across Betty's coffee table looked like evidence from a murder trial, yellowed pages that would either save our neighborhood or confirm we were all crazy for thinking we could fight the system. Betty's hands trembled slightly as she arranged the paperwork with archaeological precision. The smell of old ink and bureaucratic dust filled her living room, mixing with the aroma of her endless coffee supply and the nervous energy radiating from 8 neighbors who'd gathered for what felt like a resistance meeting in occupied territory. "I've spent 3 days in county archives," Betty announced, her voice carrying that particular authority teachers reserve for life-changing lessons. "What I found changes everything we thought we knew about our situation." Mrs. Cecilia leaned forward from the edge of the sofa, her camera still hanging around her neck from documenting yesterday's Snowman massacre. Tom shifted his firefighter frame in the small chair, while Raj's laptop hummed quietly in the background, displaying spreadsheets of Brenda's harassment patterns. "When Willowbrook Estates was incorporated in March 1994, Betty continued, the original developers included something called an automatic sunset clause. The HOA covenant expires after exactly 30 years unless formally renewed by 75% of all homeowners." The silence stretched like a held breath. Sarah Martinez set down her coffee cup so carefully it barely made a sound against the saucer. "The expiration date," Betty said, her finger tracing across faded typescript, "is March 15th, 2024. Raj's calculator app confirmed what our brains were struggling to process. "That's next Thursday, 6 days from now." The implications hit like an avalanche gaining speed. Tom was the first to voice what we were all thinking. "You're saying Brenda has been operating without legal authority for almost a year? Every fine, every violation notice, every harassment campaign since March 15th, 2023, Betty confirmed with the grim satisfaction of a prosecutor presenting overwhelming evidence. All of it conducted under expired covenant authority. The room erupted in whispered conversations as neighbors processed the magnitude of what we'd discovered. During my electrical contractor licensing courses, I'd learned about color of law violations, government officials acting under false authority to violate civil rights. What Brenda had been doing wasn't just invalid bureaucracy, it was potentially federal crime territory. Mrs. Cecilia spoke for the first time that evening, her voice quiet, but carrying 3 years of suppressed rage. "She destroyed my herb garden last spring, made me pay $300 to replant with approved species. That money was stolen from me." "We're not just talking about our neighborhood," Tom added, his firefighter training evident in how he processed systematic problems. "Pinnacle manages 12 communities. If they're running expired covenants everywhere, this is massive fraud." But Sarah Martinez asked the question that shifted our strategy from survival to conquest. What if we don't tell her? The idea crystallized with beautiful malice. The annual HOA meeting was scheduled for March 20th, 5 days after the covenant's secret expiration. Originally intended as a routine renewal vote, that meeting would instead become Brenda's public execution. "Every additional day she continues illegal enforcement strengthens our case for damages," Raj said, his programmer brain calculating leverage algorithms. "Civil rights violations, fraud charges, maybe even federal mail fraud for sending invalid citations." Betty's eyes gleamed with the particular joy teachers feel when witnessing bullies face consequences. She'll walk into that meeting expecting automatic approval. Instead, she'll face a room full of people who know she's been powerless for a year. The taste of approaching victory was sweeter than Betty's coffee. Tom's newspaper friend had already confirmed attendance at the March 20th meeting. sensing a story that would resonate far beyond local politics. Combined with Mrs. Cecilia's photographic evidence of the Snowman rampage and our systematic documentation of harassment patterns, the media coverage would be devastating. 6 days, Betty announced, consulting her calendar with satisfaction that 40 years of teaching had never provided. Brenda Thornfield has 6 more days of imaginary authority before she discovers she's been emperor of nothing. That night, after reassuring Zoe that the mean lady's power was almost finished, I sat in my garage surrounded by perfectly legal irrigation components and smiled. In less than a week, Brenda would learn that some people prepare for bullies by building something special. My garage had transformed overnight from suburban storage space into something resembling a cross between NASA mission control and a mad scientist's laboratory. Coffee-stained electrical diagrams covered every surface, while irrigation components lay arranged with surgical precision across my workbench like instruments for the world's most satisfying operation. 15 years of electrical contracting had taught me that the most elegant solutions combine simple components in unexpectedly brilliant ways. What I was designing would cost less than $200 in standard hardware store parts, but create effects worthy of a Hollywood stunt coordinator's wet dreams. The sweet chemical smell of PVC primer filled the air as I connected water lines through underground conduit to multiple spray zones around Zoe's future Snowman site. Each joint had to be perfect. One leak would ruin 8 months of patience, and Brenda's predictable morning demolition ritual would give me exactly one chance to get this right. My phone buzzed constantly with updates from our neighborhood resistance network. Betty had mobilized with the efficiency of a retired teacher organizing a school fundraiser, which meant everyone had assignments and nobody dared disappoint her. Tom's newspaper contact was practically salivating over exclusive access to our documentation. Raj's data presentations were taking shape like evidence packets for a federal prosecution. But the real breakthrough came from Mrs. Cecilia's methodical documentation project. 3 years of silent photography had captured Brenda's systematic targeting with the precision of a wildlife researcher studying predator behavior. Her photo timeline revealed harassment patterns so consistent they looked like a corporate training manual for neighborhood intimidation. "Look at this sequence," Mrs. Cecilia explained during our Tuesday garage summit, her camera displaying time-stamped evidence of selective enforcement. Same day, same violation type. The Martinez family gets a citation for lawn height. The Johnsons get nothing, despite grass twice as tall. Her quiet voice carried the authority of irrefutable evidence. The legal strategy was crystallizing into something beautiful. My divorce attorney had connected me with a civil rights specialist who'd practically started drooling when I described systematic harassment targeting protected classes. Operating under expired authority transformed neighborhood bullying into federal fraud territory, complete with wire fraud and conspiracy charges that could make prosecutors very happy. During my contractor licensing courses years ago, I'd sat through mind-numbing seminars about housing discrimination law. Now, those boring lectures were proving invaluable as we documented patterns that violated Fair Housing Act provisions, Americans with Disabilities Act protections, and civil rights statutes designed to prevent exactly what Brenda had been orchestrating. Wednesday brought the technical breakthrough that would make my system legendary. Food coloring experimentation revealed that purple dye maintained spectacular visibility in freezing water while causing minimal permanent staining, perfect for maximum visual drama without expensive property damage claims. The mixture ratio I'd developed through garage testing would create effects visible from 3 blocks away but wash off with warm water and patience. The psychological warfare aspect was equally satisfying. For 6 days, I'd maintained perfectly normal routines while Brenda conducted her morning reconnaissance missions, always slowing at our property to hunt for violations like a suburban vulture circling fresh roadkill. Her 6:15 a.m. clockwork precision made timing calculations simple enough for a middle school math student. Thursday's final coordination meeting transformed Betty's living room into something resembling a political campaign headquarters crossed with a legal evidence room. Her coffee table groaned under accumulated documentation, violation timelines, discrimination charts, financial damage calculations, and Mrs. Cecilia's photographic proof of systematic persecution. The rich aroma of Betty's industrial-strength coffee mixed with nervous energy and righteous anticipation as we finalized details that would reshape our neighborhood's future. 43 households confirmed for March 20th, Betty announced with the satisfaction of a general reviewing pre-battle intelligence. 38 committed votes against renewal. Even if Brenda brings every supporter in the county, we have overwhelming numbers to dissolve this HOA permanently. Tom's media contact had confirmed exclusive coverage rights, including advance access to our evidence packages. The story angle was irresistible. Suburban tyrant's year-long illegal reign ends in community revolt. Combined with Snowman destruction footage and harassment documentation, the coverage would reach audiences far beyond local politics. Friday brought final system testing that felt like Christmas morning for electrical contractors. Pressure plates responded perfectly to simulated vehicle weight. Water pressure achieved optimal spray height and coverage area. Timer sequences activated for exactly 30 seconds, long enough for spectacular photography, short enough to prevent legitimate damage claims. The weekend's preparation took on ceremonial significance as neighbors positioned themselves for our neighborhood's liberation. Cameras were charged, legal documents organized, evidence packets prepared for immediate distribution. The anticipation felt thick enough to cut with wire strippers. Sunday evening, as I ran final diagnostics on the most satisfying engineering project of my career, Zoe appeared beside my workbench carrying her favorite snow-building mittens. "Daddy, will you help me build the best snowman ever tomorrow?" she asked with 8-year-old optimism that hadn't been crushed despite everything Brenda had done to her innocent creations. I wrapped my daughter in the kind of hug that carries promises fathers never break. "Yes, baby girl. We're going to build a snowman so special that no mean lady will ever be able to hurt it." Monday morning, March 11th, I completed connections on a system designed to deliver justice one purple fountain at a time. Brenda Thornfield had 4 more days of imaginary power before she learned that some electrical contractors specialize in more than just lighting circuits. Some of us wire up karma. March 12th brought the kind of desperate escalation that happens when tyrants sense their empires crumbling. Brenda's morning patrol had evolved from routine enforcement to something resembling military reconnaissance, complete with telephoto photography and what appeared to be a detailed inspection checklist. The first sign of her desperation came through our WhatsApp group at 7:23 a.m. Screenshots flooded the chat showing identical violation notices delivered to every household that had joined Willowbrook United. The charges were creative fiction, conspiracy to undermine community standards, with fines starting at $500 per household. The accompanying letter read like something from a Banana Republic dictator. Organized resistance to lawful community governance constitutes a breach of covenant solidarity requiring immediate corrective action. Brenda had apparently decided that talking to your neighbors about HOA abuse was now a finable offense. Sarah Martinez called an emergency meeting in the elementary school parking lot, far from Brenda's surveillance network. 12 families gathered around her minivan, sharing violation notices that grew more ridiculous with each reading. Tom Reeves had been cited for excessive emergency vehicle presence because he parked his personal truck in his own driveway after firefighter shifts. Mrs. Patterson received a child supervision violation for allowing her 6-year-old to play in their front yard, unsupervised for 12 minutes. The smell of exhaust from passing school buses mixed with March morning air as we realized Brenda had crossed from harassment into pure fantasy enforcement. "She's completely lost touch with reality," Betty observed, examining the violation notices with the clinical detachment of someone who'd spent decades dealing with troubled students. "This isn't about rules anymore. It's about control through intimidation." But Brenda's masterstroke of desperation was still coming. That evening brought the sound every homeowner dreads: breaking glass in the middle of the night. I bolted upright at 2:17 a.m. to find my work truck's rear window spiderwebbed around what appeared to be an impact point. Security cameras I'd installed during my garage project revealed the culprit with crystal clarity. Derek Thornfield, Brenda's husband, creeping across my driveway at 2:15 a.m. with a bag of something granular that he poured into my truck's gas tank. The timestamp and infrared footage captured every detail of his sabotage mission, including his face clearly visible when he looked directly at the camera while fleeing. The discovery triggered a chain reaction of revelations from our neighborhood network. 3 other families reported similar vandalism over the past week: sugar and gas tanks, slashed tires, mailboxes damaged by what appeared to be deliberate vehicle impacts. The pattern was unmistakable: Anyone who joined our resistance was being targeted for escalating harassment beyond legal citations. Wednesday morning brought the nuclear option, a certified letter addressed to me personally, copied to the state electrical licensing board, containing allegations that would have been laughable if they weren't potentially career-ending. The complaint accused me of operating an unlicensed electrical installation business, performing unpermitted electrical modifications, and endangering community safety through unauthorized utility work. The documentation was thorough enough to suggest professional legal assistance, complete with timestamps, photographs, and witness statements from concerned neighbors. The taste of copper filled my mouth as I realized Brenda was trying to destroy my livelihood through false accusations to state regulatory agencies. One investigation, even if ultimately dismissed, could suspend my contractor's license pending review, a process that typically took months and could bankrupt small operators like me. But the mini twist that changed everything came from an unexpected source. Tom's contact at the city inspector's office called with information that shifted our understanding of Brenda's desperation campaign. 3 anonymous complaints had been filed against various neighborhood families in the past week, all alleging municipal code violations that would require expensive corrections. Here's the interesting part, Tom explained during our Wednesday evening garage meeting, his voice carrying the weight of inside information. All 3 complaints were filed by the same person, using a fake name, but the IP address traces back to Pinnacle Property Solutions. Raj's cybersecurity background immediately recognized the implications. She's creating a paper trail of municipal violations to justify her HOA enforcement. If families can't afford city-mandated corrections, they'll be forced to sell and move away. The pattern was becoming clear. Brenda wasn't just harassing people anymore. She was orchestrating a systematic campaign to force community turnover through coordinated harassment, vandalism, and false accusations designed to create financial pressure until targeted families had no choice but to abandon their homes. Betty's teacher instincts recognized the escalation pattern from decades of dealing with bullies who'd been cornered. She knows something's wrong. Her behavior is getting increasingly desperate because she senses loss of control. That night, after installing additional security cameras around my property and filing police reports about the vandalism, I ran final diagnostics on my garage project. Every component tested perfectly. Pressure plates responded flawlessly to vehicle weight simulation. Timer sequences activated with precision that would make Swiss clockmakers proud. Friday brought the final piece of Brenda's desperation puzzle. A hand-delivered letter threatening immediate foreclosure proceedings against my property for accumulated covenant violations totaling $4,200. The letter included a countdown. Payment required by March 15th to avoid lien placement and potential legal action. March 15th, the exact date her authority would expire. The irony was so perfect it felt like cosmic justice. Brenda was demanding payment under legal authority that would cease to exist at midnight on the same day. Saturday morning, I helped Zoe build what would be her final endangered snowman, a modest creation positioned exactly where my pressure plates waited 3 feet underground. "This one feels special, Daddy," she said, packing snow with 8-year-old concentration, like it's going to be really important. Monday would bring the most important snowman demolition in suburban history. March 13th arrived with the kind of crisp morning air that usually signals hope and renewal, but in Willowbrook Estates, it felt like the calm before an apocalypse. Brenda's behavior had shifted from systematic harassment to something approaching complete psychological breakdown, as if some primal instinct was warning her that her reign was approaching its end. The private security company van appeared on our street at 6 a.m., complete with uniformed guards who began conducting what they called community safety patrols. 2 men in pseudo-police uniforms, complete with clipboards and cameras, walking through our neighborhood like occupying forces documenting suspicious activity. The guard's first target was Mrs. Cecilia's morning garden tending. Apparently, watering plants before 7 a.m. constituted disruptive early morning activity requiring official documentation. The sight of a 70-year-old woman being photographed while watering her roses would have been comical if it weren't so genuinely disturbing. "This is insane," Sarah Martinez whispered during our impromptu sidewalk meeting as the guards documented children walking to school bus stops. "She's turned our neighborhood into a police state." But Brenda's masterpiece of desperation was yet to come. The emergency board meeting notification arrived via certified mail that afternoon, announcing an immediate vote on community safety measures scheduled for 6 p.m. The proposed measures read like martial law for suburbia: residents banned from congregating in groups larger than 3, mandatory reporting of suspicious neighborhood activity, and authorization for enhanced enforcement protocols to ensure community compliance. The smell of fear was becoming palpable in our neighborhood. Families who'd lived here for years suddenly found themselves afraid to check their mail or walk their dogs without wondering if security guards were documenting their movements for future violation reports. Tom's firefighter training had exposed him to crisis psychology, and he recognized the escalation patterns. She's exhibiting classic authoritarian panic behavior. When dictators sense losing power, they always double down on oppression before the final collapse. Wednesday brought the attempted coup that revealed just how far Brenda was willing to go. The emergency board meeting packed 27 residents into the community center, with Brenda presiding from behind a folding table like a suburban Mussolini. Her security guards flanked the entrance, photographing everyone who entered and requiring identification for community safety records. Motion to grant emergency powers to HOA leadership during this period of community instability, Brenda announced without preamble, her voice carrying the artificial authority of someone desperately trying to convince herself she still had control. The proposed emergency powers included authority to restrict neighborhood access, implement curfews for problematic residents, and authorize immediate removal of destabilizing elements from community property. Betty Morrison stood up from her folding chair with the dignity of someone who'd spent 40 years refusing to tolerate bullying. "Mrs. Thornfield, by what legal authority are you conducting this meeting?" The question hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Brenda's face cycled through confusion, anger, and something approaching panic as she realized she couldn't answer without revealing either ignorance or deception about her expired authority. "Community safety supersedes procedural technicalities," she finally managed, her voice cracking slightly under the pressure of maintaining lies she couldn't even remember anymore. That's when Tom revealed the recording device he'd been wearing, capturing every word of Brenda's increasingly desperate attempts to justify actions she had no legal authority to take. Thursday brought the discovery that transformed our situation from neighborhood dispute to potential federal case. Raj's cybersecurity investigation had uncovered something that made our harassment documentation look like minor complaints. Electronic records from Pinnacle Property Solutions revealed systematic targeting across all 12 managed communities, with enforcement patterns so discriminatory they constituted textbook housing rights violations. "It's not just us," Raj explained during our final garage meeting, his laptop displaying evidence that would make civil rights lawyers weep with joy. "They've been running the same illegal operation in every community they manage. We're talking about systematic housing discrimination affecting hundreds of families." The sound of his keyboard clicking filled the garage as he showed us violation statistics broken down by family composition, ethnicity, age, and economic status. The patterns were so obvious they looked like a discriminatory enforcement training manual. Mrs. Cecilia's 3 years of documentation had captured not just individual harassment incidents, but evidence of a coordinated campaign to manipulate neighborhood demographics through selective enforcement designed to force out undesirable residents. Friday morning brought Brenda's final desperate gambit, a hand-delivered ultimatum demanding immediate payment of all accumulated fines totaling $4,200, due by midnight March 15th, or face immediate foreclosure proceedings. The letter's legal language was impressive enough to suggest professional attorney involvement, but the date revealed everything. She was demanding payment under authority that would expire at exactly the moment her deadline arrived. That evening, as I completed final system checks on my garage project, Zoe appeared beside my workbench carrying her snow-building supplies. "Tomorrow's the big day, isn't it, Daddy?" she asked with 8-year-old intuition that saw through adult complications to essential truth. I knelt beside my daughter, surrounded by the innocent tools of childhood creativity and the sophisticated components of justice delivery systems, and gave her the promise that would reshape our neighborhood's future. "Yes, sweetheart. Tomorrow, everything changes." Sunday night, March 14th, I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m. and went to sleep knowing that Monday would bring the most satisfying morning of my electrical contractor career. Brenda Thornfield had approximately 18 hours of imaginary authority remaining before she discovered that some snowmen are more dangerous than they appear. March 15th, 6:15 a.m. The moment that would transform suburban HOA enforcement forever arrived with mathematical precision, exactly as I'd calculated during weeks of studying Brenda's obsessively punctual patrol schedule. The overnight snow had been perfect. 3 inches of fresh powder that Zoe and I had carefully sculpted into her masterpiece Snowman family the evening before. Dad Snowman, Mom Snowman, 2 kids, and a snow dog, positioned with engineering precision directly over the pressure plates I'd buried 18 inches underground. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee mug warm in my hands, watching the street with the calm anticipation of someone who'd spent months preparing for this exact moment. Mrs. Cecilia was positioned at her kitchen window with her camera. Tom sat in his truck across the street, ostensibly heading to work but actually serving as our primary videographer. Raj had his phone ready from his front porch, while Betty watched from her living room with the satisfaction of a teacher about to witness the perfect lesson in consequences. The sound of Brenda's Mercedes engine announced her arrival like a death knell for tyranny. Her silver sedan appeared at the end of our cul-de-sac, moving with the deliberate purpose of someone who'd made destroying children's happiness into a morning ritual. But this morning would be different. This morning, physics and justice were about to collaborate on the most spectacular demonstration in suburban enforcement history. Brenda's Mercedes accelerated as it approached our property, her familiar pattern of deliberately targeting Zoe's innocent snow creations playing out exactly as I'd anticipated. 47 neighbors watched from windows as their HOA president prepared to commit what would be her final act of neighborhood terrorism. The front wheels hit the pressure plates at exactly 6:17 a.m. What happened next exceeded even my electrical engineer's expectations for dramatic effect. 8 jets of purple water exploded skyward like neighborhood geysers, launching 20 feet into the crisp morning air before cascading down in a lavender waterfall that completely engulfed Brenda's pristine Mercedes. The hydraulic system I'd designed using standard irrigation components performed flawlessly, creating a fountain display that would have impressed theme park designers. The visual was absolutely perfect. Purple water streamed from every window, door handle, and chrome accent of Brenda's luxury vehicle while she sat trapped inside, screaming like someone who'd just witnessed the laws of physics declare war on her personal authority. Within seconds, our quiet cul-de-sac transformed into something resembling a crime scene with 47 witnesses. Neighbors poured from houses carrying phones, cameras, and expressions of pure joy as they documented the most satisfying moment in Willowbrook's HOA history. Mrs. Cecilia's camera clicked rapidly as she captured photographs that would become legendary in neighborhood justice folklore. Tom's video showed the entire sequence in high-definition glory while he struggled not to laugh loud enough to ruin the audio. That's when I made my entrance. Walking calmly across my driveway, manila folder in hand, I approached Brenda's purple-stained Mercedes with the measured pace of someone delivering long-overdue legal papers. The water system's timer had performed perfectly, shutting off after 30 seconds to prevent property damage while maximizing photographic opportunities. Brenda emerged from her car looking like she'd been attacked by a giant grape, purple water dripping from her perfectly styled hair and designer coat. Her face cycled through shock, rage, and complete disbelief as she tried to process what had just happened to her morning enforcement routine. "Mrs. Thornfield," I announced loudly enough for every neighbor to hear clearly, "I have some important information for you." The mic drop moment had arrived. "As of midnight last night, your HOA authority expired." I handed her the Sunset Clause documentation while every camera in the neighborhood recorded her reaction. "Every fine you've issued in the past year was completely illegal." The silence that followed felt like the moment between lightning and thunder. Brenda stood in her purple-stained glory, legal documents dripping in her hands, as the implications of 30 years of automatic termination clauses penetrated her consciousness. "Furthermore," I continued with the satisfaction of someone who'd waited months for this moment, "operating under expired authority while collecting fees constitutes fraud under state and federal law." That's when Tom's newspaper contact emerged from behind Raj's driveway hedge, camera crew in tow, to capture Brenda's complete meltdown for posterity and evening news coverage. "Mrs. Thornfield," the reporter called out, microphone extended toward a woman who looked like she'd been dunked in grape juice, "can you comment on operating an illegal HOA for the past year?" The community witness phase of our plan unfolded with beautiful precision. 47 neighbors stood in doorways and driveways, many recording with phones while children pointed and giggled at the purple car spectacle. Mrs. Cecilia stepped forward with her 3 years of documentation, Tom presented his wire recordings of bribery attempts, and Betty approached with violation statistics that revealed systematic discrimination. "This woman has terrorized our neighborhood for years," Mrs. Cecilia announced with the authority of someone who'd finally found her voice. "Today, we found out she had no right to do any of it." The sheriff's deputy arrived exactly on schedule, summoned by our anonymous tip about harassment complaints and potential fraud. Deputy Harrison reviewed our documentation, confirmed the HOA's expired status, and issued Brenda an official trespass warning for continued property harassment under false authority. "Ma'am," he told the purple-stained former dictator, "you need to contact an attorney immediately." As Brenda's Mercedes limped away trailing purple drops like automotive blood, our neighborhood erupted in celebration that had been suppressed for years. The revolution was complete, and it was beautiful. The aftermath of Purple Fountain Friday, as it became known throughout our county, unfolded like dominoes falling in perfect sequence, each consequence more satisfying than the last. Within 6 hours, local news footage of Brenda's purple Mercedes meltdown had gone viral across 3 states. The image of a suburban HOA president covered in lavender water while being served expired authority documents became the poster child for neighborhood tyranny getting its comeuppance. Purple Rain Revenge trended on TikTok for 4 days straight. March 20th's annual meeting transformed from routine HOA business into the most attended community gathering in Willowbrook's history. 62 households packed the community center, with Tom's reporter friend and 2 additional news crews documenting what one anchor called Democracy in Action, Suburban Edition. Yet Betty Morrison's presentation of our discrimination evidence received a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. When the renewal vote was called, the result was historic. 58 votes against renewal, 4 in favor, with Brenda notably absent from proceedings. The Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association officially dissolved at 8:47 p.m., ending 30 years of architectural tyranny with the kind of decisive community action that makes civics teachers weep with pride. But the real victory was what came after. The financial justice arrived swiftly and substantially. Our class action lawsuit against Pinnacle Property Solutions settled for $180,000 in illegally collected fines plus punitive damages. Every household received an average refund of $4,000, with families like mine who'd been specifically targeted receiving additional compensation for harassment damages. Brenda's real estate license suspension became permanent after the State Ethics Board reviewed our evidence of systematic client manipulation. Derek's ownership stake in Pinnacle collapsed when 7 other communities terminated their management contracts following news coverage of our case. More importantly, our victory inspired legislative action. The Willowbrook Reform Act became state law 6 months later, requiring HOA covenant renewal notifications, automatic sunset clause disclosures, and civil penalties for operating under expired authority. 3 other states adopted similar legislation based on our documentation. The community transformation was profound and immediate. Without HOA restrictions, our neighborhood bloomed into something resembling actual human habitat. Children's chalk art appeared on driveways without fear. Mr. Peterson's vegetable garden expanded beyond approved species limitations. The Martinez family's cultural holiday decorations could finally reflect their heritage without architectural review approval. Mrs. Cecilia became our unofficial neighborhood historian, her documentation project evolving into a community archive that preserved both our struggle against tyranny and our victory over systematic harassment. Her courage in finally speaking up inspired 2 other elderly neighbors to share their own stories of HOA intimidation. The social good that emerged from our battle exceeded anything I'd imagined. The Willowbrook Freedom Scholarship we established with lawsuit proceeds has sent 12 students to trade school programs, including 2 aspiring electrical contractors who learned that sometimes fixing community problems requires more than just technical skills. Our first Purple Day Festival last December attracted families from 6 neighboring communities dealing with their own HOA nightmares. The celebration featured purple snow cones, community gardening workshops, and Zoe's snow sculpture contest where every creation was protected by neighborhood volunteers. Property values actually increased after dissolving our HOA, proving that freedom from harassment makes neighborhoods more attractive than architectural conformity. The no HOA designation became a selling point that attracted young families seeking communities where children could be children without bureaucratic interference. Zoe's happiness was the ultimate measure of our victory. She built snow families all winter without looking over her shoulder, her artistic confidence restored by the knowledge that neighborhood bullies couldn't destroy creativity anymore. Last month, she organized a block-wide sidewalk chalk festival that would have triggered dozens of violations under Brenda's regime. "Daddy," she said recently while we built what she calls her Freedom Snowman, "I'm glad the mean lady learned that hurting people is wrong." The personal growth that emerged from our community struggle surprised everyone. I discovered leadership abilities I'd never needed as a contractor, while Zoe learned that standing up to bullies requires patience, preparation, and sometimes help from unexpected allies. Tom became our volunteer neighborhood safety coordinator. Betty started a monthly book club that doubles as informal community governance, and Raj launched a local HOA reform consulting service that helps other communities escape systematic harassment. As for Brenda Thornfield, she moved to a gated community 3 counties away, where someone else's architectural committee can appreciate her attention to rule enforcement detail. Speaking of justice served with perfect timing, wait until you hear about my neighbor who tried to steal my parking space for 2 years. She had no idea I'd been documenting everything for the perfect legal revenge. What's your wildest HOA horror story? Drop a comment sharing your neighborhood nightmare because your situation might be perfect inspiration for my next community justice video. And if you loved watching this suburban tyrant get her purple comeuppance, smash that subscribe button. I've got 5 more David versus Goliath stories dropping this month that'll make this look like a warm-up.